Hello, good afternoon. It's great to see everyone here. Let me just share my screen. I hope you can all see that. Yeah, so first, quick disclaimer, if I can get a handle on these controls. Quick disclaimer, I'm not speaking for the Scottish Government. I don't represent the Scottish Government. Commonwealth's not affiliated. So I can't exactly claim to be impartial as I go through this document, but I can give you my honest thoughts on the plan, having read it and having compared it to the work that Commonwealth have done in this sector and others have done in this sector. Because it is important. It is important that Scotland does have a strategy, a long-term strategy, far longer than the current electoral timescales and the demands of elections, that can take us through to those net zero targets that are still a couple of decades away, but looming fast. So it's a very, very brief overview. It is a wide-ranging strategy and it covers all areas of energy, which was good to see. A couple of little highlights is that the government wants to produce 20 gigawatts of additional renewable electricity capacity by 2030. Now, given that Scotland's domestic electricity demand right now peaks at about 5.5 gigawatts, you can see how that we're starting to prepare for that massive surge in demand that will come from electrifying things like transport and heating, but also the kind of capacity that Scotland has to be more than self-sufficient when it comes to energy. They're talking about 25 gigawatts of hydrogen by 2045, and I'll get to that a little bit later. Other ambitious targets are things like reducing private car miles by 20%, which they've almost actually half done just by dint of coming through COVID, and folk like myself now working from home and not having to commute every weekday. They want to develop an energy export market, and the reason why a lot of you are here today, they say they want to achieve a just transition for workers, and I hope we can talk a bit about what that is and what that means. Now, on electricity, Scotland's actually already a net exporter of electricity, and exports are projected to grow as supply in Scotland increases, and as demand elsewhere, especially in the southeast of England, grows. The issue with this sector is that the large parts of electricity infrastructure are actually a reserved issue controlled by the UK government. So if Scotland wishes to transition faster than the UK is willing to go, or to move in a direction other than UK plans want to go, that is going to bring us into conflict with the limits of devolution. It's going to require either more political powers in Scotland or greater cooperation from the UK government with regards to investment in Scotland. This is an urgent problem. In addition to climate change, which is the existential crisis of our time, we are facing a crunch point as electrification does drive up demand, but also as older power stations, especially Scotland's nuclear power plants, are hitting the end of their life and it's reducing supply in Scotland. They're going to have to be replaced very, very soon, and we have to do that in a way that limits increases in our carbon emissions. We are hitting also the demand that, we are wanting to electrify all of our transport and large parts of our heat in Scotland. If we did that, and we don't find efficiency savings, then we're going to have to quadruple the current electricity supply in Scotland to meet those demands. So there's a lot of things coming down the pipeline, as it were, that are all hitting us at the same time. But Scotland does have a copious capacity to cope with this. We just have to be able to do it fast enough. Little slide on oil. This was Scotland's 20th century opportunity. It has turned into the 21st century's liability. It is by far and away the cause of the climate emergency. This energy statement actually made a massive step for the Scottish Government, for the SNP, abandoning their decades-long held policy of draining every last drop from the North Sea. However, that promise hasn't yet been matched by policy action. It's not really talked about too much in the strategy. You can see from this chart that I pulled from it, they are still talking about continuing to produce oil even out to 2045 when Scotland's supposed to be net zero. While they've said that Scotland will now leave oil in the ground, we've got no target date for the extraction of that last drop or how much oil will be left in the ground. The energy strategy also talks about expanding investment in oil and gas through what they call INTOG, an innovative targeted oil and gas program. Innovations include powering the oil rigs with nearby offshore wind, electrifying the rigs themselves, and then claiming that they're decarbonised, which of course only works if you don't count the oil that's being produced. I've noticed several airports in Scotland are also aiming for net zero targets that often don't include the planes that land next to them. I mentioned hydrogen. Despite a pilot scheme that's starting to go on in Fife, this is not expected to be a major source of direct home heating. We're not expecting in this strategy to see hydrogen piped to your homes in the same way that natural gas is. It's too expensive. It would require a lot of infrastructure to upgrade the existing gas mains to cope with 100% hydrogen, or in many cases might even need an entirely new network, and there's better ways of doing that if we want to go down that route. Hydrogen will be important for things like a replacement for feedstock in chemical manufacture, all the pharmaceuticals and plastics and all the other things that we use oil for that don't include burning it. Although ask me later if you want to talk about a Green New Deal and deconsumerizing our economy to get rid of a lot of the plastics there. It is a potential very useful chemical as a coking agent for steel instead of using coal. Sweden has already started demonstrating this, and I know there's programs looking at this in Scotland as well. Transport is a potential area for hydrogen, although technology is kind of pushing ahead on this. Back in 2019, when Commonweal produced our Common Home Plan, our Green New Deal plan, we estimated that you'd probably find that vehicles smaller than a van will be battery powered, but larger than a van, so all your trucks might be hydrogen powered. We were wrong on that. The technology has shifted in the last few years. It now looks like as long as you don't want to travel more than about 1,200 kilometres in a single journey by truck, a battery is going to be better. And that pretty much rules out almost all truck journeys that aren't your Trans-Siberian long distance, or your Canadian long distance truckers. Basically anywhere in Europe is going to be more efficient by battery. I also have to be careful here because hydrogen is the fossil fuel industry's basically latest bridge fuel. We always talked about natural gas being the bridge fuel between coal and a green future. They're now starting to talk about hydrogen in that same language. They talk green hydrogen, they talk renewable hydrogen. What they actually in many cases want to sell us is so-called blue hydrogen, or what the Scottish Government called low carbon hydrogen, which is essentially methane with extra steps. And in fact, recent studies have shown that this kind of hydrogen derived from methane can have a greater greenhouse gas impact than just burning natural gas. Heating takes up 50% of Scotland's energy demand. Electricity is currently 25%, transport's 25%, heating is about the rest. Much of this energy strategy is largely based around air source heat pumps, which are more effective than direct electric heating, if anyone has an electric heater and knows how much that's cost them over the last several years. Prices are currently almost, but not quite comparable to gas and oil. And the problem with air source heat pumps is they're actually least efficient when they're needed most, which is when you want to heat your house in winter or cool it in the summer. The strategy here is also very reliant on private owners and private individuals making the change, which, well, if you rent, you've got no chance. You're now reliant on your landlord. And right now, I know how much these things cost. I can't afford a heat pump and pay the current inflated energy bills right now. Can anyone here? Scotland, the Scottish Government estimates that it will cost about £33 billion to decarbonise all of Scotland's heating. That's an average of £13,000 per household. This strategy only commits about £1.8 billion of public support to making that change. So the rest, where is it coming from if we can't afford it and they're not going to pay for it? We need collective action on this. And again, Commonweal has a plan for rolling out more collective solutions like district heating and thermal storage, the kind of thing that Denmark is rolling out at pace now. It's cheaper, it's more efficient, more future-proof in the long run. But it does require governments to do the work and pick up the shovels and dig. And that's where I think the problem is, the barrier is. One thing that's not really mentioned much or not nearly enough in the strategy is energy efficiency. The word insulation itself only appears once in the whole document, although they do talk about energy efficiency a bit more broadly. It is encouraging to see some of the stuff that's happened since this strategy. The Scottish Government adopting Alex Rowley's Members' Bill to increase minimum building standards for new houses up to passive house or equivalent. But we need a strategy for other buildings and for retrofit. And again, this retrofitting plan is largely being left to individuals. There's some grants, there's some loans. There's not much in the way of collective action. We would like to see street by street, community by community retrofits where entire teams can come in and just do an entire street worth of retrofitting and insulation all at once. Until then, it's again going to be up to us. There's that photo of me a couple of years ago. How did you spend your COVID lockdown? That wood fibre insulation is fantastic, by the way. And you can see the results behind me. Transport is going to be the biggest, possibly the most biggest visible change in the energy strategy. And I was actually really pleased to see this graphic in the strategy where they are saying that it would not be desirable to simply take the current transport system and replace all of your petrol and diesel cars with electric cars one-on-one. That is expensive and it doesn't solve other problems like resource use, like where do you charge the cars? I don't have a driveway. I don't have room in my street to charge. I have seen horror stories in Scotland of people daisy chaining extension cords from their flat down to street level to charge their car. It also doesn't solve traffic jams. So we need a strategic overhaul of how we move around in our daily lives. And this is somewhere where the strategy does have some ambitious goals. However, I'd like it to go even further. Again, those collective solutions are better than individual. Rather than having a private car and an electric bus and maybe a cargo bike, I'd love, instead of having to buy and own them myself, I would love a community vehicle pool where I can go and rent that car or that bike for an hour or for a day or whenever I need it. That'd be more efficient, it'd be cheaper for everybody, and I think a better solution all in. This is why you're all here. This is the just transition, and it's unfortunately probably one of the areas where the report is weakest. It talks a good game. It is using the language. But this is where the Green New Deal will mean changes and is already meaning change. People are already transitioning from jobs. People are looking to transition. Work from Friends of the Earth and others are saying that a lot of workers in the offshore industry actively want to transition into the renewable sector, but they lack the means, the route map, the access to training, the access to opportunities. So we need to develop that more. And unfortunately, the strategy is simply not strong enough on what those solutions could be. Maybe that's a challenge for us here today, to start to produce that strategy for the government. And this, when I said the previous graphic on transport was encouraging, this is the graphic that got me depressed, touting the massive increase in private investment in Scottish energy infrastructure, from ScotWind to basically everything else. The Scottish Government is married to private ownership and their favourite phrase, foreign direct investment. This is a fast and easy way to get cash into the country, and I can understand some of the reasons given the very restrictive powers and devolution when it comes to borrowing, but this means that profits will flow out of Scotland to the tunes of tens of billions of pounds every year. The companies it will flow to are the multinational fossil fuel companies who have made record profits in the last couple of weeks, and their shareholders. Much of it will be going to foreign public energy companies. So Scotland's profits will be subsidising public services elsewhere. The Scottish Government abandoned plans to launch its public energy company. The excuses keep shifting. We were told that projects like Scotland were far too large to do anything, and they wanted smaller community schemes. When the opportunity to start developing smaller community schemes came up, we've been told that they're far too small to meet Scotland's climate ambitions. So I really want to see what is the right size of public energy scheme that they can get behind. Meanwhile, Wales is pushing ahead. They have decided to launch a public energy company, and they are going for it. They are focusing on onshore wind for the moment. But why can't we follow them? Why can't we start owning our own energy and our infrastructure and the transport and everything else I've just talked about in here? So, quick conclusion: does the strategy make progress? It absolutely does. Some of the policies in here are quite transformative, and the future targets are ambitious. But Scotland has a track record of policies being delivered late or having underwhelming results. And even if the current policies do deliver on everything they promise, they're not enough to meet the targets that have been set by the Scottish Government. And those targets themselves, if they are met, will not add up to Scotland meeting its obligations under the Paris Climate Accord. It's not just this policy wonk's opinion on this. This was the conclusion of the UK Climate Change Committee. They've told the government this in just as bold terms as I've told you today. So much more work is needed. There is a public consultation on this, so we'll probably be talking about this through the day. Please seek it out on the Scottish Government website. It runs till April 4th. Read the report and have your say. Everybody in this room, everybody in Scotland, everybody has a right to share their views with the Scottish Government. So please do so. Demand a true just transition so we can protect workers and invest in our own futures. Demand publicly owned energy, and demand protection from profiteering. The link is on the site there. I don't expect you to remember it. It's quite a complex link, but please, yeah, let's get that conversation going. I'm not here to promote Commonweal, but there's our website. Go and have a look at our stuff. Go and have a look at our website and our policies on there as well. Thank you, folks. I'm looking forward to the discussion today.